Number one is be excessive with appreciation. Be so excessive. I think it's so funny. I got in this debate. This is like, there's so many things that can really, really bug me about social media. I got in this debate online, just, in comments and things like that, about if you thank your partner for doing things that they should just do. So like if your partner does the dishes or unloads the dishwasher, if you thank them, is it sort of like giving them unnecessary appreciation because, well, yeah, of course you should do that. And I just think, why do we want to be that way in our relationships? Why do we want to be, again, this one-player game? Are we in a one-player game or are we in a two-player game? I thought we're in a two-player game. If that's the case, doesn't it feel good to be appreciated?
Welcome back, friends. You're listening to the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast, just the thing we all said we needed when we first became overwhelmed, stressed out parents. Pull your hair out and say, where's the handbook for this? It felt like there wasn't one. And now there is. I'm your host, Katie Kimball from Kids Cook Real Food, and I bring together experts in the fields of health, parenting, nutrition, and more to help you, parents who strongly desire to raise healthy, independent adults ready for the world, get the information you need. My friends, parenting is the toughest and the most rewarding job in the world. Thank you for joining me to consult this Healthy Parenting Handbook, your guide to raising kids intentionally. My guest today and I had so much fun. Sometimes I have guests that I just think they're so smart, they're so wise, they say so many things so well. I just want to sit at their feet and learn. Other times I have guests I just think, I want to hang out with this person. I wish they lived in my community. And honestly, Dr. Morgan Cutlip today is the perfect blend of both. I totally want to hang out with her more, and also her intelligence level and her knowledge of her topic is massive. You are going to love her too. Her official introduction goes a little like this. Dr. Morgan Cutlip is an author, speaker, and PhD in psychology and a highly sought after relationship expert. Dr. Morgan knows what it feels like to lose yourself in motherhood, and she's determined to help mothers navigate it better. Throughout her career, she's helped hundreds of thousands of people worldwide learn how to form and maintain healthy relationships. If you are a human, you need this information, guys. Dr. Morgan has been a featured relationship expert with Good Morning America, Teen Vogue, The New York Times, Women Health Magazine, MOPS International, Loveology, and Flow, the #1 app in health and fitness. Cool. Today we get to talk about both her first book, Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself, and her new book, which is publishing in April 2025, A Better Share: How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. Pre-order that book right now. Dr. Morgan and I are going to talk a ton about mental load, a little bit about parenting, a lot about relationships. And I'm telling you, this is such a good interview. Her son and daughter have taught her more than her degrees, and they're now 9 and 11 years old, mid to late elementary school. So Dr. Morgan draws a lot from her experience as a mom and also from her clinical experience and just living life. She has the degrees to back up her experience. And I'm telling you, y'all, this is such a good podcast. I can't wait for you to hear it. Well, Dr. Morgan, I'm really looking forward to this interview. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So catch us up on your backstory. Like, why did you choose psychology and how did you come to focus on relationships in particular?
So my backstory goes way back. My dad has his doctorate in psychology, and he went back to school when I was in, probably kindergarten, preschool. And because he was working full time, going to school, had a young family, he went to school for a long, long time. And growing up, he would take me to class with him when he was working on his doctorate. I would pack, I don't know if you remember this, it's going to age me, but you remember those pretend play doctor kits that came in a plastic briefcase? I don't know if you remember this. Maybe not.
My kids had those. So
okay. I had one of those and I would pack it like a briefcase and bring paper and candy and markers and like work in his class. And it's funny because I ended up going to the same doctoral program. And one of the classes I went to, I actually had the very same professor, which is so wild. But when we would do these like long car rides or I'd spend time with my dad, he would play a game with me where he'd give me a hypothetical counseling case and I would work through it. And it was my most favorite game. And so I just grew up with a love for this type of work and the helping and the figuring it out. I think the critical thinking. And then early in his career, he started developing relationship education programs. And so he was doing it before everybody had a course. He's like teaching courses. As I pursued my education, I continued working with him and we worked together for around 15 years on his courses and content. And they've been real successful and taught throughout all the military and things like that. So I sort of was raised, it feels like, a little bit in this line of work. And so not to draw this out any longer, but the transition for me was many years ago, probably in college. I said to my dad, someday I want to help women. I don't know what that means, but like, you got your thing out. That's going to be my thing. It didn't really hit me until I became a mom. And I was like, this is brutal. Like, this is way harder than I thought it was going to be. And I thought I was going to be really good at this. And I feel like I am not really good at this. And so it was at that moment that I was like, this is what I want to help women master their relationship with themselves, their partner, and their kids, because I think they're all connected.
I am blown away that was your childhood. Like, let's be a counselor in the car. It's so cute, Morgan. Oh my goodness. And you're at least the second, if not the third interview guest this month who said, I thought I'd be really good at being a mom.
Yeah.
I got the credentials. And then life.
They don't really. I know. I when I speak about it, I always tell the story of like, I have my master's in human development and family science. Like, what? You think that would do something? It did nothing.
Are you telling me your kids, like, they didn't give you multiple choice bubble tests?
I'm like, they don't come out and be like, write an essay on how you would handle this. I mean, it's just, they're frameworks and it's information, but the actual application in real life, when you are emotionally invested and, like, I hate the word triggered, but I don't know what a better word, when you're triggered by the things your kids do, when you're kind of pushed to grow and to stretch in ways you haven't been before, like, you can't go to school for that.
Right. And sometimes your upper human brain is not accessible when your emotions are taking over. I always call it button pushing moments. The kids are pushing our buttons. So that's probably like the old school way of saying triggered.
I like it better though. Triggered is overused. We're all triggered all the time.
It is. Let's go back to hot button moments.
I love it. That's great.
Well, when we scheduled this interview, I had been introduced to you because you're an expert on mental load. And mental load, here's another phrase, right?
Mm-hmm.
Feels really common now, but I don't feel like it's been common for very long. It hasn't always been a thing. Do you know when or how the phrase was coined? And more importantly, what do we mean by mental load?
Yeah. I mean, it's funny. Because I just wrapped up my book on the mental load. And so I was deep in the reading the literature and stuff. And there's not like an agreed upon definition. So I kind of have my own definition. They all have commonalities, but I'm not actually sure the exact date that this term was really coined. I mean, in the psychological kind of like field, mental load means something a little bit different. Cognitive load means something slightly different. But there was this French comic. I believe she made a comic, but I think her profession is actually something else. But her name was Emma Clitt. It was something called, I think, You Should Have Asked. And it was this comic about how it's like a couple and the husband, it's a husband and wife, and she keeps being like in drowning in just life. And he's like, well, you should have asked, and kind of just like how we don't want to be asked. And I feel like that went viral and it sort of, and kicked off this conversation. And then there's a really popular book called Fair Play by Eve Rodsky, which just like really took to the next level. There's documentaries. So I think within the last 5+ years, this has really picked up a lot of steam. But even when I talk to people, and in regular conversation, I'll say, oh, my next book's on the mental load. Do you know what that is? A lot of people still don't know that term. So I still think there's a lot of room to grow for this terminology and this concept. But it's become a real big issue, I think, for moms. I think it's always been there, but the label helps. And in our relationships, it has a major impact on how we feel in our relationships, and it trickles into other areas.
How do you define it? What's your glossary book definition?
So I do like a big definition, and then I'll do the in the weeds. And I think the in the weeds is really, really helpful. So the big definition is basically like it's the invisible running to-do list that we carry around in our minds that takes up I call it cognitive real estate. So it's the invisible piece is really important because in our relationships, it's hard to sort of explain it to our partners because so much is invisible. And then the cognitive real estate piece is important because it crowds out energy for other things. And this is sort of the psychological, understanding of mental load, cognitive load is like it takes up space in our brains. So if you are noticing you're more overwhelmed and you feel very full in your mind, you're going to probably be less patient with people around you. You're going to be more forgetful. Be like, oh, mom brain. Well, yeah, because it's full of lots of things. So we don't remember, we sort of like shrug these things off and blow them off, but it's a real thing. It crowds out energy and mental capacity to like get in the mood for sex, which is how the relationship pieces start coming in lots of ways, but that's one big way. And so those are two important pieces of the mental load. So if I get in the weeds on the definition, I say that the mental load has 3 different domains of tasks. There is the mental tasks, and these are things like making grocery lists, or like our son's birthday is coming up. So I'm like, I have like a to-do list of like all the things I got to do to make sure people can come because I sent invitations in time and all the things. There are the physical tasks. That's the stuff this is the area where I think our partners are really good at jumping in. It's like, well, I do the things, the physical stuff's like doing the laundry, mowing the lawn, doing the dishes. It's like physical tasks. These actually are the easiest, honestly, a lot of times, because they're just like you can tune out. And then there's the emotional domain. So this domain, I think, is the real kicker. And this is like, it's a little bit tricky, so bear with me. It's like the regular calculation of cause and effects regarding the experiences of people that you love. So like we're always thinking about, for example, I have a son, lots of sensory issues with our son. Plays baseball, highly competitive. He's little, but still we're in Southern California. Stuff's competitive. And my emotional labor will be like the morning of a game where I'll make him like 60 different options for breakfast because he never eats breakfast. But in my head, I'm thinking, okay, well, if he doesn't eat breakfast, he's going to show up to his game. He's going to be tired. He's going to have less, ability to regulate his emotions. He's going to get on the mound. He's not going to have enough energy. He's going to pitch a bad game. The coach is going to think he can't pitch well. He's going to sit him more often. We like sort of like extrapolate all of these things from one little thing about like our kid eating breakfast. So this is the emotional labor. It is very hard to hand off because it is something that requires a deep knowing of members of your family. It is really hard to even delegate to your partner if they're not in the know. It travels with you everywhere. You can work full time and still be whiplashed back into life with the emotional labor. So it's a really big part of it. So this is what I want to finish with. The mental load, a lot of times in the home and the family life, is the intersection of these 3. So a task will have a mental component, a physical component, and an emotional component, and I call it the triple threat. And this is why it is so draining. A lot of times women will say to me, I don't know why I'm so overwhelmed. I'm like, well, it's all 3 domains. It's not just that you have to do the laundry. It's all these other pieces that go into it that really wear us down, that take up a lot of space, and that become hard to explain to our partners if they're not really in tune with this stuff.
That makes so much sense. And I love how I could see in your brain thinking about your son's baseball game and breakfast. And I'm like, it's just so female.
Yeah.
And I think that's too why it's hard to pass off. I remember, one of those times when my brain was full. So I decided to waste time on social media because that's a really good coping strategy.
Yeah.
Not line that out. Um, but I did see probably one of the best reels I've ever seen. And it was a husband taught, and the captions or like the words were saying stuff about mental load and how he knows his wife has this mental load. And all the time he's doing things. He's doing dishes, he's packing sunscreen in a bag. He's like doing his
Mm-hmm.
best to take it from her. But the best part was he said something like, I don't actually understand what this means. I have no clue what mental load means, but I'm trying
Yeah.
to help. And I thought, oh, that's so nice.
I actually, I mean, I don't want to take us on a caveat, but I remember I was doing an interview once and I was like, I don't really think our partners have to understand it. And they were like appalled that I said that. But I do think it's like, if you're willing to jump in, if you're like, I don't understand all that's going on inside your head, I don't think that's necessarily important to actually being a participant as a partner in things. You don't have to fully get it. You don't have to fully think the way that we think, but are you willing to learn? Are you willing to participate? Are you willing to kind of jump in there and take some initiative? I think that's the most important piece.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all that you would say that, honestly, because I think
Yeah.
it would take so very much. And even with a lot of work and a lot of conversation and then some tears and some arguments, even,
Yeah.
I'm not sure one can fully understand
No.
what one has never experienced.
Yeah.
You know, it's the same thing when I say, "Hun, what are you thinking?" And he says nothing. And when we were dating, that used to grind my gears. I'm like, you're lying. You can't possibly be thinking of nothing. This is not even a thing. And now I guess I get it, but I don't
Yeah.
understand how that's possible. And I
I'm
never
jealous
will.
of that. I think that my husband's always like, nothing. I'm like, oh, what's that like?
I'll never understand. I believe him now, at least. I don't call
Yes.
him a liar.
Yes. Yes.
But, so that's like the opposite, right? We don't necessarily have to live it or understand it to acknowledge that it's there. And, speaking of gender roles, your book it's got to be so funny. Your book says, we aren't standing across from each other on our wedding days promising to, quote, remember where every item in the house is so I can tell you right where to find it, or vowing to, quote, tell you to just relax when you can't sleep because your mind's in hyperdrive thinking about everything you need to do. That would be a real buzzkill. So that's from your newest book, not even
Yeah.
out yet, but it might be by the time this episode drops. And that one is called A Better Share: How Couples Can Tackle the Mental Load for More Fun, Less Resentment, and Great Sex. And it sounds awesome. But tell me a little bit about mental load in that book, specifically gender roles, because we're already hitting the fact that it's not balanced.
Yeah, I mean, the book is like, so I mentioned Fair Play, and Fair Play is a really great book because it gives, I don't know if have you read it? Okay, it gives a really great system for delegating the different tasks of the mental load. It's like, it's genius. There's like, don't even try to come up with something. It's so good. However, I wanted to add to the conversation on the mental load because I think there are some pieces that couples really get stuck with. And one of them is actually having the conversation about it, because there is often a lot of defensiveness that shows up when usually the woman initiates the conversation with her husband or her partner. And there's like, well, I don't do enough around here, or look at all, you don't appreciate what I do. There's these common sort of themes that show up. And so I wanted to write a book that helped couples navigate those conversations. And an important piece of that is repositioning ourselves as a team against the mental load. So it's not, when you see a lot of content on social media, it sort of postures one partner versus the other. Your mental load is full because your partner doesn't do enough to help you, or your partner doesn't jump in enough. And sometimes that's true. I'm not denying that. But when we posture it like that, it makes us combative. We become enemies. It becomes a one-player game where we're each trying to sort of win versus a two-player game where we're on the same team. And so part of what my book does in the initial chapters is it talks about how the enemy is not your partner. The enemy is the massive amount of responsibilities we take on in a modern society. It is the hustle culture, the feeling that we must always be in motion and be productive in order to be good enough. The ways that we're socialized to kind of fall into these roles that sometimes do work against us in the modern family. These are our enemies. It's not each other. And so positioning us versus the mental load, us versus the world is one of the first steps. And then I walk couples through 4 areas they have to get really good at sharing in order to navigate the mental load well as a team. And I'm not a real rigid person. So my book definitely has a lot of like opportunity to put on your own sort of spin, because I think every couple operates differently. Every family has different needs and different means. And the mental load changes every single day. So we have to have a plan as a couple to navigate the ever-changing amount of responsibilities on our plate and in our seasons and all the different demands based on what our family looks like. And so the book culminates in giving after you work through these 4 areas, how do you regularly touch base to make adjustments in who does what and make sure things feel fair in your relationship. It's not 50-50. It's about what feels fair.
It just sort of settles my heart to know that you're starting your book that way with unity, and I love it. It is everything that social media is not doing. So gosh, thank you.
It's driving me. Honestly, it's been driving me crazy. I think I need to say some things.
It's driving many of us crazy, but I think the more like you're seeing it from a psychologist's perspective, going, this is hurtful. This is breaking families down.
It's actually toxic to relationships.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. You make me think of an interview that posted in December with Tidy Dad, Tyler Moore.
I love Tidy Dad. Yes.
Yeah, and he and his wife talk about mental load a lot too, but just also a theory of just enough. Yeah. Where they want to structure their family so they have just enough and sort of push back against that too much, too big, always so fast and an overscheduled culture. So I love that. This is a good pair with that. So Morgan, tell us a secret. What's one secret for couples? No secrets about you and your spouse. All good. What's one secret for couples to make sure that each spouse feels seen and heard when it comes to those conversations about what's on your mind?
It's so funny. I have done so many interviews and it's always the questions that's like, tell me the one thing. And I'm like, I'm not a one thing type of gal.
Doesn't have to be the one thing.
So
just a secret.
I think I'll give you 2 because I can't do one. Okay. I'll give you 2 things that I think are very simple shifts that change relationships dramatically. Number 1 is be excessive with appreciation. Be so excessive. I think it's so funny. I got at this debate. This is like, there's so many things that can really, really bug me about social media. I got in this debate online, just in comments and things like that, about if you thank your partner for doing things that they should just do. So like if your partner like does the dishes or unloads the dishwasher, if you thank them, is it sort of like giving them unnecessary appreciation because, well, yeah, of course you should do that. And I just think, why do we want to be that way in our relationships? Why do we want to be, again, this 1-player game? Are we in a 1-player game or are we in a 2-player game? I thought we're in a 2-player game. If that's the case, doesn't it feel good to be appreciated? Doesn't it feel good to just know that what you do is valued and seen by your partner? So that's something that I've incorporated in our own relationship. My husband and I are always like, hey, thanks for letting the dog out. Thanks for grabbing the kids from school. These are regular things we're supposed to do, but you want to know what? Feels really good to be appreciated for them. And so I think that's something couples can get really good at really easily just by thanking each other more.
Both directions. I mean, if you're giving it out, and especially if you've talked about it, gosh, you're going to get your cup filled as well. When you say the 1-player game, I picture like watching baseball or watching football. They're constantly giving high fives and butt slaps for normal things. Good pass, good shot, good try. You missed the shot, but good try. Like,
attaboy. Yes. Do more of that in our relationships. It's wild how people withhold. A lot of times we don't give until we get, and we really need to kind of push back against that. I think it's just like it's almost like an instinctual tendency, almost protective, I think. When we're not getting, we want to like withhold. But in our closest relationship, that is going to actually cause some issues. So we need to push past that. We need to give even when we're not getting. I'm excluding like very unhealthy or abusive relationships, but in a relatively healthy relationship, give even if you're not getting. And usually it shifts things in a pretty significant way. The second thing that is a game changer is to be gracious with your assumptions. We really can create a world of problems in our own minds about our relationship. Our partners do one thing and we're like, must be nice having a maid, or he thinks that I'll just pick up after him and he doesn't appreciate me or respect me. We sort of create these entire narratives in our minds that rev us up, that change the tone in our relationship, that drive a wedge in our closeness, that make us not have any desire to be touched or touch our partners. So the more generous and gracious we can be with our assumptions about our partners, the better our relationship will be. And a lot of times it's returned.
Your whole tone changed. You started with a little smack, and then like you were a different person. It sounded like an actress on stage. And I hope everyone could hear that. Just your tone got very short and clipped, and all your consonants were getting spit out. And
that's how we do.
That's how we think.
That's how we think. I mean, I've been there. I've walked, like you walk around the house, you're huffing and you're puffing, you're banging the dishes. You're just ticked off. Right? Because you've created this entire, you've made meaning of one little thing and you've just run with it. Now you have an entire storyline. And this can get dangerous. So we have to keep those in check. And one of the tricks, there's more to it, but one of them is being generous with our assumptions.
I think that applies big time to our kids too.
Oh, yes.
And we'll jump into that. This is making me think of, there have been mornings where I wake up and I've had really vivid dreams, like actual dreams. And my husband was in it, but didn't play a very nice role. And I'll turn over and go, honey, you were such a jerk in my dream last night. And I smack him in the chest and he's like, this feels really unfair. It's your dream. And I mean, how similar to that in some ways though, is it for us to judge our spouse on the narrative in our head?
Yeah.
It's almost that ridiculous, not quite, but almost. And so, with our spouses, with our kids, we can get all worked up about an assumption or a guess or a wonder, and it's not really fair. So
no. It becomes too the lens that we sort of filter everything through. And so then it affects how we speak to them, the tone that we use, how we react to things. I mean, all of us have had the experience. I'd be willing to bet everybody's been married over 2 years. I'd be willing to bet they've had the experience where they have assumed something and then responded based on the assumption just to later learn they were entirely wrong. I mean, this is that sort of that narrative or that storyline we create in our head. So it impacts all aspects of a relationship, and absolutely with our kids. In my first book, I actually really spell this out. It affects our relationship with ourselves because we create a storyline about ourselves, and for sure we do it with our kids. So yeah, that's in book 1 if anyone wants to check that out.
We're totally going to talk about that. Again, though, I just think my husband and I have had many conversations where he thinks that I was angry last night.
Yes.
I'm I think that was my business voice. I think that was my get stuff done voice, hun. I don't remember being angry, and so it definitely goes both ways. It's not a female to male direction, for example, but we got to have these conversations so we can understand what each other is actually thinking.
Yeah. I've been sharing some stories recently about Chad. My husband's name is Chad, and our moments of stress and how we're seeing each other. And I think that one you brought up is really, really common in relationships, which is that a lot of times when a woman is stressed, men are happiest when the women are just, just rainbows and flowers. I have so many friends who are everything's fine until I get bugged by something, and then it's you can't take it. But it's true. We disrupt the sense of peace in the home when we're upset, but they have a hard time handling it. But a lot of times when women are stressed, I think men read that intensity as being kind of scary or angry, or when's this coming at me?
Aggressive.
And so they don't always respond in the ways that we need, which then just kind of turns up the dial on that. And so, yeah.
I was glad to see that I wasn't completely alone. Yes, my business voice and my angry voice. I wish there were labels over our heads. Wouldn't that be nice if a light went on? Business voice,
yes,
angry voice, you did something wrong.
Yes.
It'd be so helpful. AI someday will do that for us.
Well, we can do that. I mean, I think it's just sometimes it's such common sense, these simple little tweaks, but we don't think to do them. But we can, I've worked with a a client once who she was actually married to a narcissist but didn't want to leave. And one technique, but it works in all relationships, is like you're very clear about your intentions so that you can't be misconstrued. And you can do that in just like a regular healthy relationship. Hey, I'm in get her done mode. So if you hear my intensity, I'm not upset with you. Just so you know, it's coming out. Like I'm drill sergeant right now. So are you ready for it? And just kind of set the stage for what's to come. My husband and I actually do this because he's got a business voice and it freaks me out. And then I have one too. And so I'm like, are you mad at me or are you in go mode? He's like, I'm in go mode. I'm like, got it. Let me shift.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That alone, like this 2-minute snippet could help so many marriages right now, Morgan. Amazing. So many marriages have children, and that adds a whole new dimension. And so I know you say we can teach the next generation, our kids, how to maintain relationships best, like especially with this idea of mental load and all the skills that we need to be functioning in our home. And relationships is a very important life skill. So what are some just general starter tips for modeling good relationship building to our kids?
Ooh, this is a big one. Okay, I'll just give you a couple things. So if we do relationships in general, and then I'll do mental load. This is something that we sort of know is important, that what we show our kids in our own relationship, they're going to absorb. But not a lot of people talk about how we actually teach healthy relationship skills to kids. And you can start really young because, so I'm thinking about partner selection. So partner selection becomes one of the most important decisions of our life, like who we end up with in a long-term relationship, who we end up in the partnership, who we decide to have children with if you make that decision. And so kids really starting to like choose people to be in relationships with at a young age when we're choosing friends. So all of this friendship decision making, all of this becomes grounds for and opportunity to practice some of these skills. And one of the biggest skills is a skill of discernment, and who we choose to be in relationship with. And part of that requires, I'm not going to get too in the weeds, so I'll speak globally. What that requires is sort of like being able to analyze people. And we're living at a time where being judgmental is like the worst thing you can be. But the reality is, we have to use good judgment. We have to use good judgment in our relationships with friends, with partners, in work. We always have to use good judgment. So we have to be able to teach our kids how to do that. And part of that requires analyzing people. And you don't have to be judgmental. You be kind, loving person, but you have to use good judgment. So one of the ways when my kids are very young, we would do this is we would analyze characters in a book. So we'd be reading whatever, Piggy and Gerald, or we'd be, whatever book we were reading, and we would just, what do you think's going on right now with Piggy? What do you think's going on? We would analyze what the characters were thinking, feeling, what they're doing, what choices they made. What do you think of that? And you can get a lot out of those discussions. So that's like one little thing that you can do. I could do an entire podcast episode on this, so I'm going to move on. But
I love that so much. I mean, that's very simple.
It's very simple.
And I think I might have, maybe I did that. I don't know. My kids
I'm sure.
are very good at choosing friends. And that is just one of those little diamonds that I hold on to, like, oh, thank you, Lord, that they are choosing good friends. And
okay, I gotta give you one more. There's too many things.
Do it.
Okay. The conscience is actually part of my dad's work. He did a lot on the conscience. And the conscience is one of the most important things to figure out about somebody, whether you're dating, you're going to get married to them. And the conscience has two functions. It is how you actually live consistently with your moral beliefs. So whatever your moral code is, do you actually live consistently with it? So there's like almost like this willpower part of the conscience. And then the other is how do you transport yourself into other people's perspectives? And so the conscience is really tricky to get to know. It's a tricky thing to teach little kids to figure out, but people start developing, you can start to see a conscience at work at a pretty young age, actually. When our daughter was in preschool, she had a friend who was not a very nice friend, but I usually try to let them sort of figure that out. So she was trying to decide whether or not she's going to invite her to her birthday party. Part of what we did is we started just kind of posing questions. And something that we would do is I'd be like, well, how do you feel around this girl? Like, how did you feel around her yesterday at school? And we do thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. And she'd be like, oh, thumbs up. We had a lot of fun. We played. Okay. because this is a tricky thing about a conscience, is that sometimes it seems okay. And then you're like, but I don't know if it is. So you got to do big picture. So then we would talk about another example, thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down. Then we would zoom out and I would say, in general, when you're around this friend, overall, how do you tend to feel around them? Oh, kind of thumbs down. Okay, let's analyze what's going on here. Why do you think you feel thumbs down? So then she was able, I mean, when she was like 4, we're talking about this. She's able to kind of like pull out some of the things that made her feel thumbs down. I said, now, if we look at this and we add all these together, does this seem like this is a good friend for you to have at your party? Or does this seem like a friend that kind of hurts you a lot or says things that really aren't very nice? You're right, Mom. I think that's a good decision. So that simple metric of thumbs up, thumbs middle, thumbs down can help kids start to identify how they feel around their friends. And then you can dig into why they feel that way. And it actually becomes really helpful. We still do that. They're 11 and almost 9.
I love it. I mean, that story was so poignant. It feels very practical. Like I can apply that today.
Yes. Yeah, I think you can do it as your kids even get a little bit older. Just kind of this like general experience of being around a friend. What is that like for you? With the mental load, I'll just give one simple thing. What are the biggest desires of when I've talked to women, and I actually interviewed over 500 women, took survey data, over 500 women, then I interviewed a handful of others about the mental load. One of the biggest things they want is initiative taking. And that's from their partners, but that's what we want our kids to do too. And I think any mom's had that moment where we're like, our kids are maybe like on the couch and you're cleaning up and you're like, what's wrong with you people? Like, what are you doing? Get up. So we want our kids to notice stuff. And so in order to take initiative, you have to increase your knowledge of the home, but you have to increase your ability to see things and notice them. And so that becomes a big part of our work at home. And what I do with my kids is I'll be like, okay, go in the living room, look around, take care of 2 things that you notice need done, and then do it. And so practicing the skill of figuring it out on their own rather than me giving them orders. Go into the bathroom, notice 2 things that need done, now take care of it. And that increases their sense of awareness around the home and then ultimately their initiative taking.
Again, so practical. We can start using this today. Like if your kids are home, jump out, like pause this podcast, ladies, jump up, find a child. There's a room in your house with 2 things that aren't where they belong or more, maybe if you're normal people. This is so practical. And as a mom of 3 boys, I will say there's maybe a gender divide. Maybe it's a personality thing. But my daughter much more naturally notices and picks things up, whether it's a task or an item, than my son's. But man, are we working on that right now,
Yeah.
Morgan? Like,
which will benefit their future partners. So good for you.
I know I have a 19-year-old boy. And so he's a year out of high school. He's got a girlfriend of 2.5 years. And every so often I'll say to her, like, I'm sorry he's coming to you a little, he might be coming to you with a little more work than I had hoped. Like I'm working on him still. Yeah. But that is a good way to think about. Like I want my future daughters-in-law and sons-in-law to just be like, wow, they hardly are a fixer-upper at all.
Yes.
That's my goal.
Yeah. I mean, when you think of it that way, we're raising future partners. It changes a little bit, just like our priorities when we're raising our kids and what we're working on developing in them.
Absolutely. And our audience is in general pretty big on life skills and having those kids be prepared for all parts of life. But I always call what you just talked about, things like that, an unteachable life skill. And it is teachable, but it's difficult. It's not like how to fold a shirt, how to wash a plate. It's a bit more nebulous and it takes a lot more time. It is not a one-time sit down. Hi, son, I'm going to teach you how to notice what needs to be done.
Yes.
It's more of a habit and a lifestyle. And so, these are big jobs for moms and we do get overwhelmed. This pulls back into mental load and ties right into your previous book, Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself. And I'd love you to we'll just dip our toes into that one because we kind of deep dived into the mental load. But I know at the end of each chapter in Love Your Kids Without Losing Yourself, you include a section called Go Mom Yourself. Can you give us a little insight into what that means? Maybe one juicy little practical tip?
Yeah. So the premise of the book is that moms are the master managers of all of the people and all of the things. But we don't often turn those same skill sets toward ourselves. And so in early motherhood, we're really pulled to self-sacrifice. We sort of need to keep our kids alive and get them started on the right foot. But we sort of get stuck in that mode. And so we turn all our caregiving skills outward toward others, and we end up getting neglected. And we can end up in this place, 18 years, 20. I mean, we all know moms of empty nesters, and they're like, I don't even know who I am anymore. Or they resent their kids when they leave because so much of their life has been tied up into their kids. And the book teaches moms how to mother themselves like they mother their kids in 5 practical steps. And the short version is you have to go mom yourself. And what that means is that I encourage moms. So I take moms on a deep dive into 5 areas that are important to manage about ourselves, manage our relationship with ourselves. And then I come out to the surface level. So let's go deep. Let's understand it. If you got excavating to do, do it here. And then we're going to come out. I'm going to give you practical skills. And what they walk away with is a plan for a regular self-check-in. And so I encourage moms throughout the day, take 10 seconds. It's very fast, and check through these 5 areas that I give them. And where do you need a little bit of adjustment? And if you can't adjust because maybe you've got toddlers on your legs at that moment and you cannot do it, you can at least define what you need, and you can put a pin in it and come back to it later. And sometimes that definition is enough to take the edge off.
That's fascinating. Anything that takes 10 seconds, always good for moms, especially young moms. Good advice in 10 seconds? Yes, check.
Well, the thing is it's essentially about self-care, but I actually hate that term because it's kind of been corrupted, where it's like self-care is now associated with getting your nails done, going on a girls' weekend, having a glass of wine, taking a bubble bath. And it's like, first of all, that's just attending to your physical body, which we are way more than just a body. It's also not really getting to the deeper levels, and it's not possible to do that stuff right alongside your kids. And so we really need self-care, if I'm going to say that word, that moves the needle, that is sustainable when we're in very busy seasons of life and keeps us connected to ourselves. That's what happens, I think, is we become really disassociated with ourselves because we're so invested in our relationships. It's not a bad thing, but we have to know how to come back regularly to us to make sure we are in tune with who we are, what we need. And especially, the physical part, we do need to take care of our bodies. The rate of autoimmune disease in women is off the charts. We tend to really ignore signs that we need to take care of ourselves. So it's really important.
It's so true. I think, the term self-care, you said it's been corrupted. I completely agree. It really is a mental reset. It's figuring out where yourself is, not losing your sense of self as opposed to these external things or taking a break or having a half day off. Like it's just not sustainable for everyone. Just like that word triggered has been sort of overused.
No, it's a shame.
We should just make our own dictionary, Morgan. Just like rewrite all the rules. Well, we talked about 10-second tips. Cooking, figuring out feeding our kids, not a 10-second task, which is why it is such a massive strain, I think, on mental load. But it's where I hang out most. So I would love to hear your philosophy on getting your own kids in the kitchen and sort of this passing on of life skills.
Yes. Oh, I think I told you, I was like, this summer's going to be life skills summer. And then it's like, maybe we did 1 or 2 things. And I'm like, oh, where did the summer go? But it's such an important thing. I think you could teach me a lot. I've done a better job with our daughter, and I'm now starting to incorporate our son. We had some stuff we needed to work through before we could get him into the kitchen more with some fine motor stuff. But one of the things I've done is just invite them to participate. It's like, hey, I'm making tacos. Come on over and hang with me. Here, chop up this cabbage or whatever, just involving them in the things that I'm already doing. It's a nice time to connect. And then it's teaching them how to actually move about the kitchen, what they need. Our daughter's been cooking since she was around 3. So I'm like, that's check mark there. But our son needs a little bit of smoothing out still in that domain, just participating to come alongside. I think that applies in lots of areas of the home life of just kind of, hey, I'm going out to rake some leaves. Here you go. Come with me. Let's do it together. Bringing them alongside for some of these things that, it's fun when you do it with a parent. When you get that quality time or you throw on some music and you're chatting about stuff, it doesn't need to feel like a chore. It can be really a time of connection and working on your relationship.
Agreed. We hopefully, I mean, ideally, sometimes it still
I
feels
know.
like a chore, but
Sometimes,
you're right that if you're together, it's tempered. Everything's sort
yes.
of tempered.
Yeah.
All right, I have to say, Dr. Morgan, I always peek at my interview guests' Instagram to see if they're talking about anything in particular. And okay, so audience listeners, go right now, follow Dr. Morgan Cutlip on Instagram. Literally every single post is so rich. Get
Oh,
such
thank you.
encouragement or a realistic goal. Like I just felt like, I mean, I hit mental load very quickly because I was like, I can't incorporate all this in the interview. So I'll just mention that the Instagram is awesome. But what are you kind of most trying to teach moms and couples right now? What's your jam?
You're hitting on my struggle. I like to
Oh
talk
no.
about so many things. Right now I have an audio course. It's kind of like an unusual offering. I've not seen anyone yet do something like this. So I've been really kind of pushing on that, it's an audio course called Spark, and it's 10 exercises you can do in less than 10 minutes per exercise. And I recorded each exercise separately for him and for her, because I think that one of the tricky parts in relationships is we have our own unique perspectives, but we don't often do a good job bridging each other's perspectives. And so I was trying to offer that for couples. So let me be your translator, and you can listen on your own, and then you can come together and do these exercises or talk about them to try to minimize defensiveness and arguments. So I feel like something at the core of my work that's not explicitly said is this idea of getting good at perspective taking. We're not really that good at that a lot of times in our relationships. And so helping couples to see one another's perspective, helping them to learn practical and manageable things that they can really use to move the needle in their relationship. It's interesting. We're living at a time, and you see this in parenting, of everybody's wanting to be sort of like a cycle breaker. And yet we are also living at a time where information is consumed in like 15-second increments. And so we're really kind of conflicted, I think, where it's like we want deep and meaningful change, but give it to us fast. Serve it. So we want fast food style change. And so I'm trying to be really thoughtful about the things I'm serving up to let's actually do something that's significant, but I will try to give it to you as fast as possible. So that's what that's all about. But soon I'll be shifting into pretty much only talking about the mental load for a while as my book's getting ready to come out.
I believe that. I believe that. A book launch in itself is a
Oh,
massive chunk of mental load.
it's a lot.
So pre-order the book, friends. Make it easier for Dr.
Thank you.
Morgan to hit that bestsellers list, because I'm just soaking this up. This has been an incredible interview. I mean, you know your material and you know reality, and there's a beautiful intersection there where everything makes sense. You're not speaking from the textbook, and the rest of us are in the real world. So thank you for that. And
Yeah.
we've talked about a lot. So let's leave the listeners with like one last message of hope. What do you want people to hear just from your heart?
Oh my goodness, these are my hardest ones. I think, no matter where you are in life, this actually comes from my dad, and this is something I remember really regularly. He called it the myth of the permanent present. It's this idea that how we feel right here at this very moment in time is how we'll feel forever. And that is a total myth. And so if you are in a moment of overload, anticipating the holidays, which is where I'm at right now, I'm like, oh, so many things. It will not feel that way forever. If you are in a bad spot in your relationship and you feel like a little bit of that hope is slipping away, you feel like we just cannot see eye to eye, he doesn't get me or she doesn't get me, I want to offer you the hope that the way you feel today is likely not how you're going to feel a year from now. And so try to keep that perspective in mind, the myth of the permanent present.
Beautiful. The fact, I mean, many things in our life are temporary.
Yeah.
And if we
Yes.
could grasp that idea of looking toward the time when that is not your reality, whether it's an emotion or chronic pain or, like,
Yeah.
well, chronic was probably the bad word to use, but you're in pain for, say, physical pain for some reason, many things are temporary, and embracing that, super helpful. Dr. Morgan Cutlip, this has been incredible. Go buy the books. We will include links to the
Thank you.
books and Instagram wherever we share this. You have a free guide to talking to your partner about the mental load. Where should we find that?
Yeah, you can find that on my Instagram. I'm making some changes, but soon you'll be able to, I'll probably put it up front and center in my bio, and you'll be able to DM me and I'll shoot that on over to you. But yeah, it's really comprehensive, and it comes even in audio. So you can just listen to it, because I know how busy we are.
Nice. See, so easy, so realistic and practical. Friends listening out there, pick one thing. pick one thing from this interview, because there were a lot of both practical and philosophical nuggets here, and just do one thing today, because I think some real good changes can come of all of this. Thank you, Dr. Morgan Cutlip.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Healthy Parenting Handbook podcast. I hope your brain feels fed and your heart feels full, and that you feel connected, knowing that there are other parents on this journey with you. We're just trying to raise healthy, independent adults. And the next time you think, man, there is no handbook for this job, now there is the Healthy Parenting Handbook. Look up the podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. Please leave a review, my friends, as that helps other parents who need this information to find us. And of course, subscribe. That's a huge help. You can also look for our shorts as a reel on Instagram at Katie Kimball Kids Cook, or subscribe to the Healthy Parenting Handbook Shorts channel on YouTube. You'll get those bite-sized portions of healthy parenting advice.